Dr. Paul Artale is a motivational speaker, work-life balance researcher, author, who spent 15 years working in student affairs, which I think is why I'm glad you're here. Because we are hanging out with advisors today. We're hanging out with higher ed professionals, and you get the folks who will be watching this video. Paul's signature keynote, Hit Hard, 3 must-have mindsets to break through challenges, tells the story of how Paul overcame physical disability to play college football. I'm excited to hear about that. Paul received his PhD in higher adult and lifelong education from Michigan State University and has written articles on work-life balance for NACA, the Association of Fraternal Leadership and Values, the Association of Fraternity Sorority Advisors, NASPA, and ACPA. In a nutshell, your work has to do with employee job satisfaction and retention and how the work-life balance matters in that setting.
Yep.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell, correct.
And my favorite book of yours is The 2-Year-Old's Guide to Work-Life Balance, which is all about the struggle to find balance as a student affairs professional, which is why you're here. Please welcome Paul Artale.
What's up?
Nothing. What is your favorite band from the 80s?
From the 80s. That's a good question. I gotta go. It's kind of a toss-up, you know.
Yeah.
It's a 3-way tie. So I'm a big, being an Italian, Bon Jovi's in there.
Right.
Being a Canadian, I got to give love to my man, Bryan Adams.
Oh, yeah.
And, but like Guns N' Roses is my band. So, I mean,
no
really
kidding.
Those
are 3 really like knockout rock bands. Like you're a rocker.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. I'm a rocker.
You're a rocker. You're a Canadian rocker.
I'm a Canadian. My pre-game mixtape back in the day was almost all rock, a little bit of rap, but like mainly rock, like all AC/DC, all those guys were in there.
All right, so tell me about the 2-Year-Old's Guide to Work-Life Balance. I'd love to hear more about that book. What inspired you to write that book?
So the book was a blog initially. But the blog idea came out of, well, we're talking student affairs folks, so they'll get this. So I was at, I think it was ACPA's Aspiring Senior Student Affairs Officer Institute, right? So I wanted to be the VP Student Life, the Dean of Students, something. I wanted to be an executive level position. So I'm at this retreat, and a couple of things happened at that retreat. First, I was realizing that I was actually interacting with my wife and my son, who was 2 at the time. I was interacting more with them when I was away in Nashville than when I was actually at home, and was almost, even though they weren't physically there, it was almost like I was able to enjoy them on a level, in a way I hadn't normally. Okay. And so that happened. And then at the time, in terms of work, you know, I got back, I booked a day or 2 off. I wasn't feeling well. I kind of got sick on the return flight. And just student affairs stuff happened, and I had to like go in early. And then again, it came back to that thought in Nashville, like, why is it I'm home for 2 days and I'm now sick and I'm not seeing my family? So that was the impetus for like, I need to change with how I do my life and what's going on in my life. And at the time, my son, who could barely speak, he would speak, you know, in broken English, and he would just say things to me that really got me thinking. Those were not his intentions, I'm sure, but just things like, is daddy happy, right? And you're like, right? I mean, right? So something a 2-year-old would totally say, and something that as an adult, you're like, of course I'm happy, but are you? So that's the book. So the book was supposed to be a blog, and then the blog got really big, and I just went with it. And so it's 9 chapters. Each chapter is a saying of my son's that then relates to the book, and it has a book, and it comes with an e-course here. Shameless plug for the book.
I love it. Yeah, I'm glad it's there. It's going to help everybody. But let's talk about what's in the book.
Yep.
Right. So right now, everybody is probably working and living in the same space. So maybe having an even tougher time delineating between those 2 things and setting up some real work-life boundaries. What advice could you give to everybody at home?
So, good question. I think there's a couple pieces of advice with the boundary piece. Number one, you have to know so my research focused on something called work-life boundaries, flex style boundaries. Basically, what's your boundary style, right? Student affairs professionals, we've probably taken every leadership assessment known to man, like the Myers-Briggs and StrengthsFinder, all that good stuff, right? Harry Potter, which house are you? I'm Slytherin, by the way. And so there's an assessment for work-life, essentially, right? As a quiz, you can take it. It'll tell you what your preference are, but I'll tell you in brief what the three overriding preferences are. You have your integrators, right? So integrators believe that like work and life, there are no boundaries. Things just sort of mix and match. Like, if you need to do something personal right now, you take care of it and then, you do something professional later on. It's all over the place. And there's this ebb and flow of just, you find the pockets of time that fit when they need to fit, and it comes out in the wash. Your second style are your separators, the complete opposite of the first, right? The separators are like 9 to 5 might be work time, or they're going to construct hard boundaries, not just between work and life, but everything, right? Like yoga time might have its own special time and place. And so separators are ignited by physical cues and time cues. And those boundaries are very hard, right? But before COVID, they were the ones that once they leave the office, don't contact them unless it's a super an emergency, and even then.
Right.
And then your third are the volleyers, right? So volleyers are kind of a hybrid of the two, and they basically say, I might have to hyper focus in one area over another for a certain amount of time. So folks in res life or student affairs, we know August into September is going to be very work focused, even now, because students are coming back. We got to get our preparations in with what's going on now. You're looking at the news, you're looking at your campus announcements, right? But you're hyper focused on it, on work, knowing that when, let's say mid-September comes, there might be a bit of a reprieve, hopefully, and then you can do some family time or whatever. And so volleyers say, I shift my schedule based on what it needs. So I'm going to hyper focus. I'm going to set rules around that focus. So I used to coach football. That's how my entry in student affairs was coaching, right? And people knew August through November, realistically, I was hyper focused on football and to some degree residence life, because I was doing both at the same time, coaching small colleges. But once around Thanksgiving hit till really the week of move out in the halls when I was there, that was for me a lot. Like that was a good 3-4 week run of just personal time. And then of course certain periods in the summer. So that's the first part. Know your boundary style. And then the second part is, I think you have to learn to communicate that style. You have to talk about that style with other folks, right? You have to talk about it with your boss. You have to talk about it with your teammates. You got to talk about it with anyone you interact with. And because we're home, if you're home with others, whether it's roommates or partners, or children, whoever, extended family, a conversation about how that works for you as well, right? If you have someone who lives at home who's a high separator and the other person in the house is highly integrative, there needs to be a conversation. How do those two people have dinner, right? I mean, it's different, right? Like, what does 8 a.m. mean? 8 a.m. means something completely different for one person or another, right?
Oh, it's really interesting, right?
Right, and so thinking about it, and say, well, you can say, well, this was the way it was before COVID, and it's true, but again, remember the separator, physical space. So I might have been gone at 8 a.m., but I'm around, and my separator partner might be like, why are you here? Because you're not getting going. So anyway, so you have to have those basic communications, figure it out, and just to be honest, find ways to work it out. And I would add, in the digital age, I think, with digital plus COVID, being cognizant of what your limits are, setting, having conversations, I think, regardless of your style, with your supervisor about when is it okay for me to step away. I know when I was in student affairs, there was a time you felt like you couldn't step away to take time for yourself. I remember eating lunch, crammed in the lunchroom, which was a closet, right? And just wolfing down food so I can get back to work. Why I did that, I don't know. But, with being for virtual work for some, to communicate, when is it okay? Like, it's nice outside and I'm kind of stressed. Can I go walk for half an hour? Can I, what are the rules around that? Can I do that? The answer is yes, by the way. Also, I'll tell you, you can, but do I need to communicate that with the office? Do I just need to have my phone on me? Like, what are the rules of engagement? Because I do think the one thing that is different is because everybody's connected, we're still trying to figure out how this works in its entirety. And I do think that because of that, we have to figure out ways to just make sure that it's clear. And if you're a supervisor, I'll say, I would urge you to tell your staff, just take some time. If you need to step away, like take that time for yourself. Don't feel like if you have a lull, you got to sit in front of the computer and look at the inbox or something, right? Or have your phone on you. Like,
Right.
that time, because my philosophy, I got this from starting in athletics, was you let talented players do talented things. So let your talented staff use their talent in a way that makes sense to them. I think that'll help.
That's great advice for the supervisors to be cognizant of the different personalities of the folks that report to them. But imagine that if your boss is somebody who is sending you emails at 11:30 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just, I think we need to encourage everyone to really advocate for themselves, right? To
Absolutely.
to set these boundaries, even if you've. But don't you think like even if you've set a pattern in the last 3 months and you've sort of played along with the expectations of your supervisor, like is there a way to just say like, all right, I've had enough, or is that what you recommend? Like say like, look, we have to have an honest conversation about your expectations of me, like
Yep. Yep. It's all about, honestly, it's about
yeah,
hashtag difficult conversations for some, but it's about the open, honest conversation. So if
yeah,
let's look at the 11:30 p.m. email is a great example. Okay.
yeah,
Uh, Supervisor sends that at 11:30. Question number one: does the supervisor require an immediate response or not to that 11:30 p.m.? Right? Because the supervisor, in their mind, just be like, this is my time to flex and get my work done. Right? So
right,
are they communicating that with the staff? If as a staff member you're receiving at 11:30 and you feel like you need to respond right away and you haven't heard anything from your supervisor, then something as simple probing question like, listen, I'm getting a lot of late night emails. Is this something you expect me to reply, or is this, like, what's the deal? Right? Hopefully in a perfect world, no, that's just me. Maybe I can auto schedule them to come out at 8 o'clock in the morning. Don't be overwhelmed when you get 15
right,
emails at 8 a.m. Right? I mean,
right,
but so there's some of those expectations. I find in a lot of cases just talking about it, and if the parties entering are results focused, meaning they really look at the long-term goal that needs to get accomplished, not the
yeah,
micro goal that usually doesn't have a hard deadline on it,
right,
then this gets smoothed out and you can work across different. If you
right,
have, let's be honest, a supervisor who is, I expect immediate reply on everything, then that becomes, yes, you have to defend your boundaries, but now you're talking about living in a completely different world where now you're talking about kind of surviving, getting through. You still got to have those open communications to figure out a way. But now you're
right.
talking about potential. I don't want to use, I don't. We're going to be positive here, so I'm not going to talk about exit strategies, but I'm talking about like if that is the expectation, right? That might be a fit problem. So in the long term, you might be looking at, some other unit of student affairs or maybe just a change or something in it. But usually, I'd say most cases, the conversation around boundaries and expectations from day one is really good. If someone's transitioning to a new job, a new position, your portfolio is changing, use now as a time to discuss those expectations,
Yeah,
including work-life balance, including those expectations, right?
right,
Whenever folks are interviewed, especially in student affairs, about you're going for a job interview season comes up. I always tell them that two things: that number one, ask a work-life balance question in your job interview, right? And even at the end, because we all have that common experience. We know that student affairs can be stressful. We know that it's a lot of work for a lot of us. And
yeah,
so you can coach it as like, what do you do to renew your energy? What are good times? Like, ask a question and don't worry about the answer. Look for the response in the room. The body language will tell you about 90% of what you need, right? Do they laugh and chuck it off? Do they look at each other confused? Do they come back with, hey, no, this is a great place to recharge. This is what we do. So ask the work-life balance question in the interview if you can. And if they ask you a work-life balance, sometimes you get them in the interviews. When they ask you for questions, I always write down the work-life question they ask me, and then I repeat it back to them and say, okay, you asked me about what do I do to recharge? What do you do to recharge? Because now you're just using their language and you're deepening
right,
it,
right,
right?
right, right.
And so I would do that. And same thing, if you get the job interview, if you get the job, then make sure that whatever is important to you, you're advocating for before you say yes. Don't assume that you're going to
Correct.
walk in the first day one and be like, guess what? I'd like to work from home on Tuesdays. That's going to be okay, right? And then they
Yeah,
say no, and you're angry, right? I
yeah,
mean, one of my jobs in student affairs, I mean, I got into the habit later in my career, but was before I took a job, one job was 45 minutes to an hour from my house and without traffic. And I hate, I'm in Michigan. I don't like snow, ironically, or I don't like driving in snow specifically. And I said, in the winter, if things are low key and I don't have anything I need to be there for, how do you feel about me working from home, if I don't feel safe on the roads. And my supervisor was like, no, that's important. If you don't feel like you can drive safely here and you don't have anything you need to be here for, and just basically you're an adult, make a decision. And that's why I said yes at the end of the day, because the answer had been no.
Right.
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 So
Because they cared. Your supervisor cared about you.
yeah,
Right?
that's right. And that's what was important to me.
Right.
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 So that's the key. Whatever's important to you, advocate for it.
Right. Now's actually a good time of year if we're thinking it's summer, we're in August, and but any time of year, it's okay to advocate for yourself. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. Any time of year. I mean,
any time of year. So if you're listening to this conversation and you're like, God, I gotta have this conversation with my boss, just do it. Do it. Right. And how about, I mean, we have to set those boundaries with students as well. If we're advising student groups, what would the exception be is if there's an emergency, they can call your cell phone, right?
But even then, what's an emergency? They define it, right? Because like this thing here is like one of the best and worst things in the world, right?
Yeah.
And with students, we have to acknowledge that this is how students communicate. It's how we all communicate, but students more and more communicate this way, and it's part of how they interact. But having rules around it, having communicating expectations, and even with yourself, like what's your relationship? One of the things I teach in my seminars is like, what's your relationship with your technology? Like, right, like what apps do you have on your phone? Do you use your phone? Do you have a work phone and a separate phone? Right? If it's blended, again, this comes back to styles, right? So
right.
If you do have it blended on your phone, which apps do you get notifications for? I can tell you that for the longest time, I would not integrate my email on my cell phone because I would tend to overcheck my email when I did. And it was easier for me to go through the web browser and check my email, because I knew that if I had to go to the website, type in my 47-character password, that I had to have an actual reason to do that.
To check it, right.
And that for me, that was significant.
I think a lot of people probably struggle with this. I know that I do, and I need to work on this, is that I get an alert and the email distracts me from what I was working on. Right. And so I'm going to take your advice and based on what you were just saying, is like really create my own boundaries, because I'm easily distracted as a human.
Yep.
And the more you get to know me, the more you'll see this. So, okay, let's jump over to your keynote.
Sure.
Your keynote about how you became a football coach.
Yeah.
Like, we've been talking about your studies, your academic world, right?
Sure.
What was it like growing up as Paul Artale, who was going to become a football player?
It was different. So for those who don't know, if you can't see, right, I was born with missing fingers and some shortened forearms. So the joke is, like I have a Ninja Turtle hand here and like a Lego man hand here. And so I was born looking different. Growing up, I had a pretty good childhood. I'm not going to lie. I think, I grew up in a really kind of cool immigrant, old school Italian neighborhood in Toronto, and had great friends, and moved to the suburbs, which was a bit of a culture clash. But, once we moved there, I became interested in wanting to get involved in sports. I always liked athletics. I always liked being physical. It's just how I'm wired.
Yeah.
And I started out doing martial arts for many years, something I still practice. And I just wanted to play football. And so, it took me a couple of years to work up the courage to do it in high school. But in the 11th grade, I made the team. 6 years, I was cut in my senior year. So junior year, made the team, cut senior year, reporter for the school papers about as close as they came. I covered the football team. And then, long story short, 6 years later, I have a chance to walk on at the University of Toronto, which ironically was the team I grew up cheering for and watched them win a national title when I was a teenager. And walked on, made the team, made the dress list, got to play. And then that parlayed that into a coaching career, college coaching career, which was the reason I moved from Canada to the United States, was to coach college football. And that's how my entry into student affairs. So it was pretty good.
You went to Nebraska first. Am I right in saying that? Is that?
No, I went to St. Mary's, Kansas. I went, then I went to Doane College in Nebraska, Doane University. They were a college at the time. And then back to St. Mary's. And then I transitioned out of athletics, or out of coaching, because I really love coaching. I actually still miss it. But I was at the time thinking, and student affairs folks will appreciate this, I really enjoyed the back behind the scenes. I enjoyed football operations. I enjoyed like running a team. And I talked to some athletic directors, and every single one of them, from Division I to Division III NAIA, all told me, stop. If you want to be an athletic director, stop coaching and start becoming an administrator, which I was already kind of doing. They looked at my resume and they said,
Yeah.
you're in student affairs. They said, do you want to, like, where do you want to coach, or where do you want to run a team or an athletic department? And I said, I kind of like the Division II NAIA kind of world. They're like, you should really go deeper into your student affairs work, go get your PhD, go become an administrator, because a lot of those institutions, athletics reports to student life. And that's actually a better, and with your background, you'd be a strong asset. So that's how I kind of got into it, and sort of
but then you didn't go back to athletics. You went into the world of keynote speaker, the world of author, researcher.
Yeah. Because when I started my PhD, I also started my seriously speaking. I had done some keynote speeches before. People, before I was married, I would have the big football ring on, the alumni ring they gave you, and people would ask. So I tell them the story. It's a great story. So I started like motivational speaking. It's fun. And my partner, she got tired of me talking about being the next Tony Robbins. So she should do it, or just don't talk about it. So I had to go do it. So at the time I was starting my PhD, which everybody in student affairs and athletic directors told me to do to make me more marketable. I also started motivational speaking, like more serious as a business. And after about 8 years, it's sort of, I found that's where my truest passion was. And I also found that with student affairs, in terms of motivation with them, I like to motivate the student affairs folks as much as I do the students, right? Like I care about the people who care about the people. And it's really important, because I've had really good, in student affairs, I had really good bosses who cared about me as a person and my professional development. And I've had supervisors, to be quite frank, who you're just like a battery, right? Like you put in, once your energy's gone, they'll find someone else. And good people in this profession who really care about the students, who can do good work for the students, who make, student affairs folks, you make a difference in these students' lives, right? Through these activities, the activities themselves, even just simple stress relievers, can make a big impact, in the involvement, all those cool things. And I was like, there's not enough people who care about those people. Like I go to a NASPA conference, and there's, let's say out of 100 programs, 98 on how to help students, 1 on assessment, and there's 1 on work-life balance, right? And I think like, and usually the work-life balance one is, go take a breathing class. And so I became passionate in helping student affairs professionals just be better at their job and help them find the right fit, because some people leave the profession, and you know what? For me, residence life wasn't my jam. It took me 5 years to figure out residence life wasn't my jam. Career services was. I really enjoyed my time in career services. It makes sense. You're coaching people, so if I can help people make those connections and find environments and stay within student affairs to help our institutions and our students, I'm a happy guy.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. And right now, we need to encourage all the advisors and the student affairs people and everybody with the work-life balance, take care of yourself so that you can care for others, right? Take care of yourself so that you can care for others. And it's not selfish. And if you want to call it selfish, it's important to be selfish, right? You gotta put the oxygen on yourself before you put it on your kids on the airplane. Do it in real life too.
100%. That's I'm okay with it. I have colleagues, we've had these discussions before, that it's some people are afraid to take care of themselves. Like they're afraid of the backlash and all that stuff. And I just say, listen, you have to take care of yourself first at the end of the day. I actually found, here's the irony. I found that most students were actually in support of me taking care of myself. When I would say something along the lines of, I'm going to go home early tonight and spend time with my family, or I'm going to spend this weekend just hanging out. There was this, the student government leaders who were like, that's awesome. We see you here too much. Do that, right? Like it was the students, right? We have some challenges of they typically don't have boundaries in the way that we, they're not hard. They're more likely to text you, and so you have to, but what I'm trying to say is that they were in favor of you taking time for yourself. Right. They know that millennial demographics, Generation Z, they value taking time for yourself. So the advocacy has to come with the company culture, the campus culture, I should say.
So it really is okay to the more vulnerable and honest you are with your students. They want to feel good too, so they understand why you need to feel good. Right?
Absolutely.
What's your most motivational Bon Jovi song that you listen to? What would you put on in the here. If you were traveling, you woke up in a hotel and you were like, I need an inspirational song this morning. What's it gonna be?
It's My Life, baby.
It's my life.
That's right. It's now or never, right?
It's
I mean,
now or never.
when you hear those first couple of beats, like bow, bow, like it's just like that. That was actually, I think, on my pregame my pregame tape
Right.
at some point. I would
What
say
is,
if I
what
was
is
feeling
the,
melodramatic, it'd probably be Blaze of Glory, but it doesn't usually end.
what's the first line of Blaze of Glory?
Uh,
That's got a big guitar intro, right?
a
Oh no,
little
that's
bit of a
Wanted.
long.
That's Wanted, Dead or Alive.
Yeah, no, it's dead alive. I wake up in the morning. I raise my weary head. I got an old coat for a pillow, and the dirt was last night's bed. So it's kind of got like that.
What does that
That
sound
level.
like? What does that sound like when it's sung?
Yeah, nice try. I see it. There's a reason my musical theater career was very short.
I'm going down in a
That's right.
blaze of glory. That's fun. And thanks for being here today.
Hey, it was fun. Thanks
Thanks
for
for
having me.
reaching out.
Appreciate it.
I really look forward to seeing you again and chatting with you. Uh, really great stuff. I'm excited to read your book. So, gosh, we could talk for another hour. Maybe we'll have to
Sure.
do another interview.
Well, we'll do another one at some point.
Yeah, right. And we'll just focus on overcoming obstacles. Right now, we're focusing on work-life balance, setting boundaries, taking care of numero uno, right?
Yeah. Well, honestly, they're all interrelated, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Work life and overcoming obstacles, motivationless. At the end of the day, I help people design the lives they want, right? That's what it's about, right?
Yeah.
So if you have an obstacle in your life, it's an obstacle. You're trying to get somewhere. You're trying to change the trajectory of your life, or you're trying to take
Yeah.
your life in a direction. And it's the same as work-life balance, right? I mean, they're very similar in the sense. So it's really about figuring out what it is you want and then going after it. The obstacle is just an inevitable part of that, right? So you have to figure out how to get around it.
Yeah.
They are the same. They're very interrelated. Here's the thing about obstacles, right? Obstacles are also opportunities.
Yeah.
And so with COVID, specifically this obstacle, right? It's an opportunity for folks in student affairs. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it's an opportunity to learn new modes of engagement, right? It's an opportunity to connect with students that you might not have connected with in the face-to-face model, right? It's an opportunity to learn about different technologies. Like it's an opportunity in a lot of different ways. So like obstacles breed innovation, and they breed, just getting it done in a different way, which, with my obstacles being born, just by nature, I've had to figure out how to do things differently. And
Right.
that was just another day at the office for me. It wasn't like I sat there and said, well, how am I going to do this differently today? Right. It was just like, okay, here's a 125-pound, barbell on the bench. I can't make a fist like people. How am I going to lift this? Right. And figuring it out. And then realized real quick, you probably use the machines. Because after a certain level, your thumbs are. I used to have to support the bar on two thumbs essentially. I'm like, they can only hold out so much. But you learn that. You learn to do it differently, right? And when I was playing, same thing. Some techniques worked really well for me, and others weren't for me. And you learn that that's fine. I learned different ways to do it. And then as I coached football, I learned other players, whether they have a physical challenge or not, they all have different skill sets. Why I love strengths-based learning is because they have different. So you learn to build off of what you got and to get somewhere. So that would be my that's my piece on obstacles, is that it's an opportunity. This is a unfortunate but unique opportunity to learn more about ourselves and what we can do, especially in student affairs. And I know that some of my colleagues for years have been saying, I'd like to do more digital stuff, but it's kind of viewed negatively, or like, I don't know. And now you're kind of there, right? And now you're figuring it out.
Right.
So
Now you have permission. Right.
Yeah. Now you have permission. It's not taboo. Do it. And I think, there's a side benefit of, here looking at online delivery of programs. It's, like I said, you're engaging with students who might not normally engage with you, right? So you're talking about students who might have been at work at the time, might have had different lifestyles, couldn't come to campus. They might have been remote to start with, or primarily remote, right? You have students with disabilities. So thinking about learning more about like captioning and how to make your digital platforms more accessible. And in some cases, just giving them the opportunity to ask questions and to engage, right? We know students with disabilities, sometimes online engagement is actually online methods will increase their engagement, whereas face-to-face, they won't. A lot of reasons for that. But anyway, so it's an opportunity. Every obstacle is an opportunity. That's been my mindset. And so when this happened, I was like, this really is scary and it sucks, but hey, there's some good, we can still do some good stuff out of this.
Do you find that taking those chances on trying new things, that right now the world is more forgiving, like, right? So take a chance, right?
Take it. Look at it this way. Stephen Colbert, who I love. Okay.
Yeah,
Stephen Colbert is doing his show. It looks like what in his living room with his TV behind him, and
right.
right. I mean, he's probably got a slightly nicer He's got a nicer camera than most of us, but literally, like celebrities are doing their shows from their living rooms, their basements, and their attics with essentially really fancy iPhones and
Yeah.
and lighting kits. And the world is more accepting, which is good because now the opportunities for us to really showcase our content and who we are and what we do, and not worry about the bells and whistles. Just worry on the message we deliver.
Right. And you've got a great message.
There you go.
Paul, thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's great. It's a lot of
Good
fun.
chatting with you. I want to sing with you one of these days. I'm not just going to sing to you. You know, maybe, wait, okay, hold on. I'm not going to get you to sing, but can you look into the camera
Sure.
and recite as a poem a Bryan Adams song? Like, just look into the camera as if you're, you know, it's, let's pretend like it's like a, I don't know, like a, it's not a first date. It's
Sure.
sincere. You've known this person a long time. Your partner, right? It's sincere. Bryan Adams lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me.
All right. So I got my first real six string. I bought it at the Five and Dime. I played it till my fingers bled. It was the summer of '69. Me and some guys from school, we had a band. We tried real hard. Jimmy quit. Jody got married. Should have known we'd never get far. How's that?
That's awesome. And when I look back now,
That's right.
those days are gone forever.
The summer seemed to last forever.
Oh, and I held it in my hands.
And it was now or never. Those were the best days of my life back in the summer of '69.
That was awesome. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
All right. Take it easy.
You too.